All right, we are live. I think this is video number 6 of first ever International MBA Day for GMAT Club. So I'm here with Tony. Tony is an immigration lawyer from New York. I worked with Tony recently on my own immigration things, but I want to chat about that later. But Tony, let's introduce yourself a little bit. Who are you?
Hi, I am Tony Shu. I am a New York-based immigration lawyer. I, like yourselves, I was once an international student here in the U.S. I came to the U.S. when I was 17 for undergraduate school, and for I stayed that way as an F1 student for more than 10 years. It was not a fun experience towards the end, and I part of the reason why I started my own law practice is because back when I was a student, I had this belief that if I was just to become really good at something, what I was studying, then everything would work out. And then U.S. immigration system hit me in the face, and that's not the case. To give you an idea, I was lucky enough to get to some of the best law firms in the US. They agreed to sponsor me, which is very hard to convince them to do. But then my H1B got rejected 3 times. By rejected, I mean I wasn't picked in the lottery. And that kind of experience, it really stays with you when you work so hard for a decade and then the reality of immigration law hits you like that. You want to do something about it. And that's why I started my own law practice to really help someone like myself back in the days to navigate the U.S. immigration system. And that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you have such an amazing story, which resonates with a lot of people now because I think H1B has become significantly more difficult than it used to be just 5 years ago. I do see some signs of improvement. Maybe this day, I don't know, but
Mhm.
it's really unlikely. Like I remember when I was applying to business school, which was almost like 7, 8 years ago at this point. Um, there was like a 1 out of 3 chance of
Mhm.
getting picked in the lottery. I think that chance right now is 1 out of 10, which is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
So, how I want to structure this conversation, we don't have a ton of time, right? So, I want to structure this conversation into a happy path and a sad path, and how prepared you need to be for either of them. So, for the happy path, it's like basically you go to your MBA program or your master's program or whatever. You have maybe, if you're lucky, which I think most schools offer STEM OPT now. So you have some STEM OPT, so you can work for a little bit, 1 to 3 years for any company. They don't need to sponsor you or anything.
Mhm.
And then you have to like to stay even longer. You need an H1B. The happy path is like, okay, fine, your lottery gets selected, and then you join that company, and that's it. Then the world is yours. Do you see in that happy path any reason to reach out to you, or any reason things may
Mhm.
not be that happy going forward?
Yeah. 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 It's the happy path is very much what I would say like a safe path, which is get selected in H1B and then have your employer sponsor you. However, when you do actually walk this path, you will discover that a lot of it is not up to you. A lot of the control is somewhere else. Like, first, the lottery is not up to you, right? As you said, 10% chance now. And then, second of all, the perm, which is the sponsored green card path, is also in a way not up to you. First of all, you're lucky if you get an employer who's familiar with this whole system. Like, if you are working for Google, Amazon, all of those big tech companies, then they have a system to put their employers through this process. But most employers, they don't know what this is at all. Like, you have to first educate them, and you have to convince them that A, this is not too costly, which it is, and then B, that they're not going to be like getting into trouble or something, which most employers are nervous about when it comes to immigration. So yeah, there's definitely ways to get off the rail if you
Right.
are, even if you walk the happy path. Not to
I would
mention,
say,
yeah,
sorry, go
I was gonna go even darker. There are many
Oh yeah,
different
I
ways
mean,
to go wrong.
I was going to go darker too because I feel like for international MBA students, they have three industries. Generally speaking, they have like three industries in their sites, right? It's consulting, tech, and finance. And finance end up being either like wealth management, investment banking, or private equity, right?
Mhm.
The good news is all of these kind of belong to this happy path, right? Like all of them are very familiar with the H1B sponsorship process. Now, whether you get in or not, like you said, it's not up to you at all. But I think even if you consider that you got in the lottery, sure, but that doesn't necessarily take into account all of the mess that happens post parm. So, like you mentioned, like you need parm. By the way, for the uninitiated, parm is the way for converting your H1B status to a green card status, which is you are applying to be a resident. So even if you get perm, which by the way takes easily about 2 years to get done because you have to do all of these labor tests and things like that, you will realize that by the time you actually get your green card, it's you're going to be like 70 years old, especially for
Yes.
like an Indian
Mhm.
person or a Chinese person, which is most of international students in
Yeah,
business school.
that's right.
Um, the other darker thing, like if you get laid off, or if you, which
Mhm.
was not a thing people thought happens, but
Yeah.
the last 2 years kind of changed that a lot. Like
Mhm.
people have been laid off from tech, people have been laid off from consulting. Regardless of whether you have perm or whether you don't have perm, you have like 60 days to find a job, which will also
Yep.
offer an extension of your H1B,
Mhm.
and go in through that process. Otherwise, time out. You have to go. So all of these, even in the happy path, are things that people don't necessarily think about. But did,
Mhm.
did, did I miss anything darker there, or did you have more things that could tread us off from that?
um, I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but that's actually what I was going to say. It was, what if you get fired, right? What if your job is no longer there? Well, like some of the companies they fold, sometimes the economy is hard to predict. You could very much end up being stranded in like visa land.
Yeah,
Mhm.
totally. So about 5 years ago, when I was in business school,
Mhm.
STEM OPT was a very unique flower, right? There was barely schools that were giving out STEM OPT. In fact, when I was at Michigan, Michigan was not doing STEM OPT. They
Mhm.
started doing STEM OPT the moment I left, thanks Michigan. But can you walk us through STEM OPT? I feel like a lot of, like, we have 100 people watching here. They may not know what STEM OPT is. What
Mhm.
what is what is it really? Like, how do you get eligible for STEM OPT?
Yeah. So to talk about STEM OPT, first let's talk about OPT.
Sure.
OPT is optional curriculum training, and it is something that you can do after your main F1 program ends. Usually, it lasts for a year, and it gives you the ability to get an internship and really, practice what you learned in the US. Normally, regular OPT has to be directly related to your major, but whatever you do has to be directly related to your major. Regular OPT, as I said, only lasts for a year, right? And to many, that translates to one shot of applying for H1B, like because you
Right.
only have 1 year. However, there is an exception, well, more like a bonus to regular OPT. Called STEM OPT extension. And basically, it is as follows. If you are a STEM major, STEM being like science, technology, mathematics, you are able to get 2 additional years of OPT. So instead of 1 year, you get 3 years, right? And under STEM OPT, there are tightened regulations on what you are supposed to do. You can only work for paid jobs. You're not allowed to work for free. You are also there's also a certain number of hours you have to work
Right.
every week, and you also have to have a supervisor, etc. But really, what translates to international students is that you have 2 more years, right? And that very realistically, you have 2 more chances of getting H1B lotteries, and you have 2 more years of trying out with a potential employer to see if they're willing to sponsor you. More options when you have the STEM OPT.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I didn't have a STEM OPT, but I was lucky
Me
enough to
neither.
get up in the lottery, which was
You
very,
were? Wow.
yeah.
I'm
But
jealous.
to move to the sad path,
Mhm.
the sad path could be many things, right? We already talked about some of the sadness and the happy path, so those things all
Mhm.
apply. But
Yeah.
also not getting picked up on H1B, which is surprisingly more common.
Mhm.
Maybe getting picked up, then getting laid off. So Tony, I came to you about a year ago, I think, when I had no reason, like no concrete reason or no urgent reason to come to you because I had my H1B and like things were valid for a couple more years. I came to you because I was nervous about tech as an industry. People were getting laid off, and I wanted to explore my options. And you gave me a lot of things to think about, right? So let's talk about that. So for someone who is thinking about applying to an MBA, these people, they typically tend to be people with a decent amount of experience, right? They have worked pretty hard. Some of them have worked for 5, 6, 7 years. So they may have a compelling cases for some of the things that you told me to think about, right? So what are some of the H1B alternatives or H1B, guardrails that people can think for?
Yeah, absolutely. So H1B alternatives first, and then we'll talk about maybe some of the other safety nets. There is one that really stands out for H1B India, which is the O1 visa. The O1 visa is for extraordinary ability talents who are either in the business, technology, education, athletics, or art or motion pictures industry. And what really is unique about the O1 visa that is different from the H1B is that it is more achievement based. And for you type A personalities out there, it's very much functions like a checklist of achievements. And if you check like 3 out of the 8 checklist criteria, then you can apply. And to someone like an MBA student, it might be appealing because it gives you something to work on, and it really is. It has a lot of advantages compared to H1Bs. For example, it doesn't have the prevailing wage requirements, which a lot of employers hate. And it also has the like infinite renewability feature. So as you might know, H1B is good for 6 years. After 6 years, you have to come home for a full year to try again, right? O1
Right.
doesn't have that. As long as you remain extraordinary according to the law, you can stay here and renew up to 3 years at a time and just repeat. It gives you a lot of options and gives you a lot of future possibilities.
So, trying to deconstruct O1, so H1B is employer specific, right? So,
Mhm.
even in your petition, you have the name of your employer. If you need to change your job, you need to have a new petition replacing your old petition and things like that.
Yep.
Is O1 the same way?
Um, Sort of. It is a little bit more flexible than that. There are 2 types of O1s. One of them is sponsored by an employer, and the other one is sponsored by what's called an agent. Um, the thing about O1 is that you do still need a sponsor, right? You
Right.
can't petition for yourself for the O1. However, the definition of a sponsor is more flexible under the O1. For example, if you have an agent sponsor petitioner, then you are technically allowed to work for multiple employers. Now, these are more commonly seen in art cases, so like an artist or a model, etc. Usually they are sponsored by like an agency, then they sign different clients, etc. But I have had success in the past to give like an entrepreneur or an investor an agent sponsored O1 visa where they take on multiple gigs, they take on multiple contracts, and they are a consultant to many different companies. So it is a possibility. What it does is it gives you the possibility to work for multiple employers if you have the opportunity to.
Got it. So other than O1, what was the other thing that you were mentioning as an H1B guardrail?
Yeah. Um, there are a few options available to certain nationality. It's called the E2 investor visa, which is any country that has signed a trading treaty with the US, is an E2 treaty country. And if you're a citizen of that country, then you can invest a certain amount of money and start your own business in the US. And this is popular among like Canadians, British, Australians. We see a lot of that. However, the caveat is that Indians and Chinese students are not eligible to go for this type of visa because India and China are not E2 countries.
Right.
Um, then the alternative is L1 visa, which is another common one. L1 visa are probably nowadays very hard to get if you are starting a new office in the US. Um, and there's also a requirement that is going to be tough for most international students, which is in order to get the L1 visa, you must have worked 1 full year in a foreign affiliate or parent or subsidiary company of a US entity in the past 3 years. So
Right.
I see a lot of this being used by students who like maybe did not have H1Bs and then they
Yeah.
go back to their home country to work full year, like at their family business or at another company. And then they get sent back after that 1 full year requirement is met to the US to like be on an L1 visa to work for the company.
I have also seen in like big tech companies or even consulting, like you got in right after MBA, but your H1B did not work out, and they
Mhm.
would typically send you to like a Canada or an Ireland, like for Google, Ireland is fairly common. I don't know why, and then after a year, you come back on an L1 because you're like a multinational manager or whatever, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And they take up all of our EB1Q space, which is we can chat about that.
A
But
little
yeah,
bit of bribery. Mhm.
that's fairly common. Happens, a fair bit.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's I would say a second guardrail to the H1B visa. Um, Finally, there is one last guardrail, which is like day one CPT programs,
Yeah,
which is frowned upon. And I wouldn't recommend doing this unless there's absolutely no other choice,
yeah.
because, well, day one CPT programs are sort of like frowned upon when you renew your status in the US or when
So
you try to get
what
in.
is J1 CPT?
Okay, so day one CPT programs are basically F1 programs, right? Just like any MBA programs that offer um, like your ability to work on day one. So typically, you're not allowed to work immediately after you enroll in the program. You're only allowed to apply for CPT after 1 full year of program study, right? But there is an exception to this rule if you had previously either previously completed another degree or like the school has a day one CPT program authorized
Right.
by the government. And so there are these schools that offer this day one CPT programs that allows you to work and stay in the US. This is appealing because let's imagine a scenario where you have just not been picked in the H1B lottery and then you're desperately looking for a way to stay. You're not eligible for O1, let's just say, at this moment, and you really don't have any other choice. You can enroll in another F1 student program to like maybe get a master's or a PhD, but you also run out of money. You've ran out of money and you want to be able to support yourself, right? So these day one CPT programs offers kind of like the best of both worlds where you can stay here on an F1 visa, but also work because you can start working on CPT from day one. Um, yeah, that's the gist of it. And that's the reality of the situation. It is not ideal because you might run into some immigration issues in the future when you try to renew your visa or try to like get another visa in consulate. You might find yourself get stuck in administrative processing if you previously used a day one CPT program.
Yeah.
But a lot of us um, ran out of options at some point.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, I know people who have done this, like a PhD program with a
Mhm.
day one CPT, because they did not get an H1B. They still had an employer, so they wanted to remain in status. And I'm sure, like, the frowned upon thing, it's like a trade off, right? Just like anything else. We
Mhm.
are almost running out of time, but I want to touch on EB1 a little bit because we worked on that together. What is that? I
Yeah.
kind of know, but I want for our
Yeah.
audience, what is that?
Anybody who's gone through the process isn't sort of like have an expert. Um, EB1 is one of the employment based green cards. So if you imagine PERM, the employer sponsored version, as like, I don't want to say the second category, the second preference. It's officially the second preference green cards. EB1s are the first preference, meaning like they get preferential treatment above all the other categories. And EB1s are reserved, similar to O1, for really extraordinary people, right? Except compared to O1, the bars are even higher. So someone who's gotten EB1, you can fair and square say that you were at the top of this field, like yourself, Shovik. And so the criteria are very similar to that of O1. And there are about 9 to 10 criteria. And then you have to meet a minimum of 3 out of the 8 to 10 criteria. And then you go into step 2, which is like basically saying even after meeting 3 criteria, that's still not enough. You still have to show that you're really at the top of this field, right? So that preparing for this EB1 require a lot of years of accumulation of experiences. I would not recommend somebody cram the EB1 unless they have had years of experience under their belt, because that usually won't work, right? It's another story if you've had the experience and you just want to meet some of the criteria, then we can maybe work on that. But yeah, you really have to have the basics under your belt. What I find most attractive about EB1, first of all, it is the hardest type of green card. It's just really hard to prepare. I like myself a challenge. The second thing is it is the shortest in terms of wait time. It's the fastest
Right.
in terms of wait time. And if you're getting stuck in the green card waiting queue for like 20 years, you can get 15 years. It used to be you can get 19 years because it used to be like EB1s, you just get it in like a few months, right? But starting from last year, it takes about 3 to 5 years right now, which means you get a chunk of your time back. The chunk of your life back is pretty nice.
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, I still hope things will catch up and it won't take 3 to 5 years,
Mhm.
but it does take up a lot of. And I think the reason I wanted to do the session with you was because I want people to think about it. Because when I shared my EB1 story with like my coworkers or other MBA students, people just didn't know, and a lot of them who have been working in tech or consulting have been fairly high achieving for 10, 15 years. I wouldn't say they qualify very easily, but with a little bit of work, they do qualify. So I wanted to make sure that people have this in their radar. So, Tony, for people who are either applying to business schools or are in business schools and are wanting to explore visa alternatives, how do they reach out to you? How do they, understand their situation and get your feedback?
Yeah. So I do evaluations fairly often. So I would say just either call us or reach out to my email or come to our website. And then just let me know that you came through us, came to me via GMAT Club or this video. And then we'll do some sort of evaluation for you to really come up with a plan. We do have coaching available. I do recommend that, like for anyone who is an MBA student looking to plan their paths in the future in advance, definitely book a coaching session, book a strategy session, because it really does help to put yourself in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank
I'm
you for
gonna
having me.
go to New York at the end of the year and definitely grab some lunch again with you. But this was awesome. And again, thanks for helping me and many of my friends with their visa journey. And yeah, and for everybody in GMAT Club, I think what I wanted to get through to everybody who's watching is immigration is not something that you think about while you are in the MBA program, because you have a lot of things to think about as well. So front loading that, being able to think of having an immigration strategy and not leave everything to luck of the draw of the H1 makes life a lot more easier to deal with later, which I didn't do, but I wish I did. Tony, thanks again. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and I'll hope to see you soon.
Thank you.